You walk into a room and no one looks up. You speak and the conversation continues without you. You're there, but you're not. If you've ever felt this, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It's not that they hate you, it's worse. They treat you like nothing. Machiavelli studied this 500 years ago. He called it psychological erasure, and he discovered something disturbing. It doesn't happen by accident. You taught them to ignore you, through small behaviors you didn't even notice. And the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly how it happened, and more importantly, how to reverse it. This isn't motivational content. This is behavioral psychology backed by Machiavellian observation. If you want to understand why silence has more power than explanation, and why the moment you stop talking is the moment they start listening, stay with me. There is a moment when you realize something is deeply wrong, not because someone attacked you, insulted you, or openly rejected you, but because they treated you as if you were not there at all. No reaction, no resistance, no acknowledgement, just absence. In Machiavelli's world, this is not a misunderstanding, it is a verdict. Being treated like nothing is not accidental, it is not random. It is a silent psychological decision made by others when they conclude that your presence carries no consequence. Machiavelli understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. Power is not taken from those who fight. It is taken from those who are ignored. And once a man is ignored, he becomes usable. At first, the signs are subtle. Conversations move forward without waiting for your input. Decisions are made around you, not with you. Your words receive polite nods, but no action follows. You begin to feel invisible, yet you cannot point to a single moment where respect was openly withdrawn. That is precisely how this process works. Power rarely announces its departure. Machiavelli observed that humans do not need to hate someone to diminish them. They only need to stop fearing the cost of doing so. When people treat you like nothing, it is because they have calculated, consciously or not, that ignoring you is safe. There is no punishment, no retaliation, no disruption. You have been psychologically disarmed. This is where most people misunderstand the situation. They believe being treated like nothing is caused by bad luck, toxic environments, or unfair people. But Machiavelli would warn you, environments do not decide status. Behavior does. Status is constantly tested, recalibrated, and enforced through small social experiments. And every time you tolerate being overlooked without consequence, the test is passed. For them. Notice how quickly this spreads once it begins. One person dismisses you, another follows. Soon, your presence becomes optional. This is not because they suddenly became cruel. It is because your reactions taught them something dangerous about you, that you absorb disrespect silently, and silence, when it carries no threat, invites escalation. Machiavelli wrote that men are driven less by morality than by advantage. When ignoring you carries advantage and no risk, it becomes the dominant strategy. This is why people who are endlessly patient, endlessly understanding, endlessly available, are often reduced to background noise. Their reliability becomes invisibility. Their tolerance becomes permission. And here lies the most unsettling truth. Being treated like nothing often happens to those who believe they are being virtuous. You remain calm. You avoid confrontation. You explain yourself. You give second chances. You assume people will eventually recognize your value. Machiavelli would call this a fatal misunderstanding of human nature. Recognition does not emerge from goodness alone. It emerges from consequence. Power is felt before it is acknowledged. When consequence disappears, so does relevance. Think carefully about the moments you were dismissed. Did anyone fear what would happen if they crossed you? Did your silence signal strength or safety? Machiavelli warned that a man who cannot impose psychological cost will be stripped of influence long before he notices it happening. Being treated like nothing is not the end of power, but it is the final warning before irrelevance becomes permanent. And the longer it continues, the harder it is to reverse. Because once people grow accustomed to your absence, your presence becomes disruptive. This is the threshold, the moment where most people either remain invisible for life or understand that respect is not requested, explained, or earned through patience. It is enforced through presence, restraint, and the quiet certainty that ignoring you has consequences. And in the next part, you will see how this psychological erasure begins long before people stop listening. and why the behaviors you believed made you safe were the very ones that erased you. This psychology of being treated like nothing does not begin with others. It begins with the signals you unknowingly send before anyone dares to erase you. Machiavelli understood this with brutal clarity. People do not wait for permission to test value. They probe quietly through small violations, subtle exclusions, and moments of disregard. The first test is almost invisible. Someone interrupts you and does not apologize. Someone changes plans without informing you. Someone jokes at your expense and watches your reaction closely. These moments feel insignificant, yet they are diagnostic. They reveal whether your presence carries weight or whether it can be bypassed without cost. Most people fail these tests not because they are weak, but because they are conditioned to believe that tolerance equals maturity. They smile, they explain themselves, they let it go. Machiavelli would call this a strategic error. When a boundary is crossed and nothing happens, a silent conclusion is formed. This person does not enforce reality. Once this conclusion takes root, behavior shifts. Requests turn into expectations. Respect turns into assumption. And eventually, acknowledgement disappears altogether. You are no longer challenged because you are no longer considered relevant enough to challenge. You have become predictable, and predictability is fatal to influence. There is a common pattern in those who are treated like nothing. They overcommunicate, they clarify intentions, they justify decisions. They fill silence because silence makes them uncomfortable. But Machiavelli warned that excessive transparency weakens authority. The more you explain yourself, the more others feel entitled to evaluate you. Power, in contrast, speaks through restraint. When someone of consequence is ignored, tension follows. When someone without consequence is ignored, nothing happens. People do not consciously think this through, they feel it. And feelings guide behavior far more reliably than logic. Consider how people treat silence differently depending on who produces it. When a powerful figure goes quiet, rooms become uneasy. When a powerless figure goes quiet, they disappear. The difference is not volume, it is perceived consequence. Silence without weight is absence. Silence with weight is threat. Machiavelli observed that humans respect what can disrupt their plans. This is why being endlessly agreeable slowly erases you. You become part of the environment, useful, harmless, ignorable. People stop reacting to you because nothing changes when they do. The cruel irony is that the more you try to regain relevance by being helpful, available, or understanding, the deeper the erasure becomes. Each concession reinforces the belief that you will remain present no matter how you are treated. And when presence is guaranteed, attention is withdrawn. This is not about becoming loud, aggressive, or unstable. Machiavelli never advocated chaos. He advocated controlled unpredictability, the knowledge that crossing you has a cost, not emotional chaos but strategic withdrawal, altered access, or silent consequences. Being treated like nothing is the result of a system that has already learned you will absorb pressure without pushing back. And once that system stabilizes, reversing it requires disrupting expectations, not explaining them. In the next part, you will see why attempting to earn respect after it is withdrawn almost always fails, and how Machiavelli viewed reputation not as something repaired, but something recalibrated through decisive shifts in behavior. Once respect is withdrawn, most people make the same fatal mistake. They try to negotiate their way back into relevance. They become warmer, more helpful, more transparent. They believe consistency will rebuild trust. Machiavelli would consider this delusion. Respect is not restored through effort. It is restored through recalibration of perception. When someone begins treating you like nothing, it is not because they misunderstood you. It is because they understood you too well. They learned what you tolerate, how you respond to pressure, and how little disruption follows their disregard. At that point, persuasion is useless. The system has already categorized you. Machiavelli understood that human judgment is lazy. Once a conclusion is formed, people defend it instinctively. If they see you as inconsequential, every attempt you make to prove otherwise is filtered through that assumption. Your words lose weight. Your explanations sound defensive. Your kindness feels transactional. Why does explaining yourself make things worse? Because explanations place you in a lower position by default. They imply you require validation. They invite evaluation. An evaluation is never neutral. It always favors the observer. Power, by contrast, does not ask to be understood. It allows misunderstanding if it preserves leverage. Ask yourself this: when someone truly powerful is misunderstood, do they rush to clarify, or do they let the discomfort linger? Silence forces others to sit with uncertainty, and uncertainty is one of the few psychological states that reliably restores attention. At this stage, a rupture is required. Not an emotional outburst, not confrontation, but a behavioral discontinuity. Machiavelli believed that sudden shifts redefine identity faster than gradual improvements. When access changes without explanation, people notice. When availability disappears without apology, curiosity returns. Have you ever noticed how absence is treated differently depending on who creates it? When a low-value person withdraws, they are forgotten. When a high-value person withdraws, they are discussed. The difference is not disappearance, it is the memory of consequence. This is why being treated like nothing often persists for years. People remain present without impact. They show up reliably. They respond immediately. They smooth over friction. Over time, they teach others that their presence has no strategic value, only utility. Machiavelli warned that utility without leverage leads to exploitation. You are not respected for what you give. You are respected for what changes when you stop giving. Until others feel that shift, nothing about their behavior will change. There is also a deeper discomfort at play. People who explain themselves excessively often fear being misinterpreted. They crave alignment, but alignment is not power. Power tolerates tension. Power allows others to wonder. Power does not resolve every question. This is where many fail. They confuse kindness with credibility. They believe moral consistency ensures social authority. Machiavelli saw reality differently. He observed that authority emerges when actions create uncertainty about limits, not when intentions are made clear. So ask yourself, what would change if you stopped clarifying your position? If you allowed silence to replace justification? If your responses became slower, fewer, and more deliberate? Would people lean in or drift away? The answer reveals how you are currently positioned. In the next part, you will see how Machiavelli viewed silence not as passivity, but as a filtering mechanism, one that separates those who respect you from those who only exploit access. Machiavelli saw silence as a sorting mechanism. Not everyone deserves access, explanation, or continuity. When you are treated like nothing, it is often because too many people have learned they can access you without effort. Silence disrupts that economy. The moment you stop responding automatically, something subtle happens. People pause, they hesitate, they wonder whether the rules have changed. This pause is not confusion, it is recalculation. And recalculation is the first sign that your presence is no longer being taken for granted. Those who respected you only for your usefulness react first. They probe, they send casual messages, they create excuses to re-engage, not out of concern but to restore the old dynamic where you were predictable. Machiavelli would recognize this instantly. It is not loss they fear, it is loss of control. Others react differently, they grow quiet. They observe, they adjust their behavior. These are the ones who sensed value before, but never fully acknowledged it. Silence forces them to confront what your absence might cost them. This is where respect begins to re-enter the equation. There is a critical distinction here. Silence does not create value, it reveals it. If nothing changes when you withdraw, then you were already irrelevant in that environment. Machiavelli believed this clarity, while painful, was necessary. Better to know your position than to live in comforting illusion. This is why many people avoid silence. It exposes uncomfortable truths. It shows who depends on you and who ignores you. It reveals whether your presence is strategic or merely decorative. And, once revealed, it cannot be unseen. Historically, Machiavelli observed that rulers who spoke too often diluted their authority. Every decree explained weakened the next. Every justification invited debate. Silence, by contrast, made actions feel heavier, more deliberate, more final. The same applies socially. When you stop narrating your intentions, others are forced to interpret your actions without guidance. This uncertainty increases attention. Attention restores relevance. Relevance restores leverage, but silence alone is not enough. If your actions remain unchanged, silence becomes absence, not authority. Machiavelli understood that silence must be paired with consistency. Fewer words, but firmer boundaries. Less explanation, but clearer consequences. This is where many misunderstand the strategy. They go quiet but continue to tolerate disrespect. They withdraw verbally, but remain available behaviorally. This creates confusion, not power. Silence must alter access. It must change what people receive when they cross lines. Have you noticed how differently people behave when they are unsure of your reaction? When they do not know whether you will engage, withdraw, or ignore? That uncertainty forces self-regulation. People become careful when they cannot predict outcomes. Machiavelli believed that self-regulation by others was the hallmark of authority. You no longer need to correct, confront, or explain. The environment corrects itself around you. Being treated like nothing begins when your presence has no effect. It ends when your absence creates tension. The transition out of being treated like nothing is never smooth. In fact, it is most unstable precisely when it begins to work. Machiavelli warned that power shifts provoke resistance before acceptance. When others sense that their access to you is changing, they do not immediately adapt. They test harder. This is the phase where discomfort peaks. People who once ignored you suddenly resurface with confusion disguised as concern. They ask questions you do not need to answer. They seek explanations you no longer owe. This is not reconciliation. It is an attempt to restore the old balance where your presence was guaranteed and your boundaries were flexible. Most people collapse here. They mistake renewed attention for regained respect and rush to re-engage. They explain the silence. They reassure. They soften the shift. And in doing so, they undo the very leverage they created. Machiavelli would call this the cost of impatience. Power requires endurance through uncertainty. What feels like progress is often a final test. The environment wants to know whether the change is permanent or performative. Silence that is broken too early signals fear of loss. Silence that is sustained signals recalibration. There is also an internal battle at this stage. The instinct to belong resurfaces. You question whether the withdrawal was necessary. You wonder if you overreacted. Machiavelli understood this psychological tension well. Humans are wired to seek acceptance, even at the expense of position. Resisting this urge is not natural. It is trained. Here is the turning point. When you maintain restraint long enough, behavior adjusts without discussion. Invitations change tone. Conversations become measured. Disrespect loses momentum because it no longer produces the same response. People stop treating you like nothing because nothing no longer happens when they do. This is not about dominance. It is about consequence. Machiavelli observed that authority stabilizes when others regulate themselves in your presence. You do not need to remind them of your value. They sense it through altered access and controlled availability. However, this phase also reveals who should not be allowed back in. Some individuals only respect you when they fear losing you. Once equilibrium returns, they will attempt to push boundaries again. Silence helps you identify these patterns without confrontation. Observation replaces reaction. Being treated like nothing trains you to overperform, over-explain, and overgive. Reversing that conditioning takes discipline. You must learn to do less, but with intent. Fewer responses, fewer justifications, more selectivity. Machiavelli believed that restraint was the highest form of strength because it prevented unnecessary conflict while preserving leverage. Those who master it do not need to announce change. They let behavior speak. At this point, respect is no longer chased. It is cautiously extended. People test less, they assume more. Your presence regains gravity, yet there remains a final shift, one that transforms restraint from a tactic into a stable identity. Without it, silence becomes situational. With it, silence becomes structure, and that is what we will reveal. Perfect. Closing in the same pattern, with strong, applicable, and definitive closure, as we did in the previous ones. Machiavelli understood that power only becomes permanent when it ceases to be reactive. Silence, used only as a response to disrespect, is a temporary tool. But when silence becomes a structure, a natural part of one's posture, it ceases to be a tactic and becomes identity. This is where the change takes hold. Being treated as nothing doesn't begin when others decide to ignore you. It begins when you accept being ignored without changing anything in your behavior. Similarly, respect doesn't return when you are noticed again, but when your presence begins to change the atmosphere, even without words. The practical application of this is simpler than it seems, and more difficult than it sounds. It begins by eliminating automatic explanations. Not every question deserves an immediate answer. Not every misinterpretation needs to be corrected. Not every silence needs to be filled. When you speak only when there is real gain, your words regain weight. The second step is to control access. Not just physical access, but emotional and psychological access as well. Respond more slowly, engage less, carefully choose where to invest your attention. Machiavelli knew that unrestricted attention destroys hierarchy. What is always available is always devalued. The third step is accepting the loss. Some people were only around because you were predictable, tolerant, and easy to use. When that changes, they disappear. This isn't social failure, it's filtering. Silence reveals who respects you and who only benefited from your lack of boundaries. Over time, something curious happens. You stop feeling the need to prove your worth. Decisions become more straightforward. Your mind becomes less occupied with justifications. You act, observe, and adjust. Anxiety decreases because you are no longer trying to control other people's perceptions. You are simply standing your ground. Machiavelli believed that true authority doesn't need to be declared, explained, or defended. It manifests itself in how others behave when you enter a space. They speak less, they listen more. They measure their words. These signs don't come from charisma. They come from perceived consequence. Being treated as nothing was the warning, not a sentence. A silent invitation to change one's attitude. Many ignore this warning and spend their lives trying to regain respect through effort, kindness, or patience. Others understand that respect is not granted to those who ask for it, but recognized in those who uphold boundaries. If you apply this, don't expect applause. Expect adjustment. Expect a different kind of silence. Expect more restrained reactions. That's the sign that something has changed. So here's what you do next. For the next 7 days, run this experiment. 1. Stop justifying your decisions. Just act. 2. When dismissed, stay silent. Don't fill the void. 3. Reduce availability. Make access cost something. Then watch. You'll notice people pause before crossing you. You'll see conversations shift when you enter. You'll feel tension return, and tension is respect. This isn't manipulation, it's realignment. Machiavelli didn't invent power dynamics. He observed them, and now you can too. If this changed how you see social positioning, hit like. It helps more people find this. And if you want to go deeper into behavioral psychology and power, subscribe. I break down one concept like this every week. Remember, silence isn't weakness. It's the space where respect is rebuilt.